I really want to start to talk about what Tennessee was able to pull off against Oklahoma. What's been the vibe in the college football landscape about where Tennessee is as a program?
Well, I think people are looking at Josh Heupel's tenure there a little bit differently now because, it was always about Josh Heupel's offense, and it was about they would run that warp tempo speed. And did they have a quarterback? Did they have a bunch of receivers that could get open or be mismatches? But I think you watch that game and you're like, oh, they realized that Oklahoma wasn't going to be able to move the ball in their defense. Like Oklahoma's O-line could not block Tennessee's defensive line. And Josh Heupel called a different game because of that. And I think it was kind of eye-opening because I always feel like teams that aspire to win national titles, that want to win the SEC, that want to win the Big Ten, want to win these big conferences, you got to be able to win games in a variety of different ways. You can't just have one way you win, and if it goes perfectly, you win. And if it doesn't go like that, you can't win. That was Tennessee 2 years ago. Like Tennessee beats Alabama in a game designed for Tennessee to win. They then go to Georgia, and Georgia plays a game that Tennessee can't win. Well, now this Tennessee team, like they have to go to Athens later this year. If they were to play Georgia in a game like that, they seem equipped to play in a game like that now. And I think that's a very interesting distinction between what Tennessee was and what Tennessee is.
Do you think that Tennessee can actually continue to recruit at the level that they are based on not being such a, one-dimensional team? When you looked at the team before offensively, yeah, but do people buy Tennessee as like more of a more physical and traditional SEC team?
I think they're starting to. It's really interesting. So I think on the defensive side of the ball, they've got enough tape now that you can look at it and go, okay, they're going to play defense, or at least try to play defense the way Georgia and Alabama play defense. They're not going to they're not one of those. And Heupel said this, Josh Heupel said this when I had him on at SEC Media Days on my show. I mentioned something about up-tempo offense, and he stopped me. And he's like, we are not going to be one of those teams that plays an up-tempo offense that forgets about defense. Like we plan to have a dominant defense at Tennessee, which I thought was interesting because it was very clear he wanted to make that point. And I think it wasn't just me he's made it with a bunch of people. Like that's sort of a mission statement that, hey, do not look at me with Lincoln Riley and those other guys that have struggled to put good defenses on the field, because I want to be a team that can have a dominant defense and an offense that goes fast. The question is, could you do it? I do think you look at it now, you look at James Pierce, like James Pierce is going to go in the top 10 of the draft. So you can say, hey, here's proof of concept. Here's a guy who came to us. We developed him. He's in the draft. I mean, and the thing is, you got Rodney Garner, coach of the defensive line. He's been in a lot of defenses that were dominant. He's produced a lot of NFL linemen. So they have the capability of doing that. The offensive line's the more interesting one for me, Dukes, because David Sanders, the number one O-line recruit in the class of 25, is going there. We're still waiting for the first Josh Heupel recruited offensive lineman out of high school to start for them. Now, Lance Hurd came to them as a transfer, but he didn't sign with them in a high school. So you still got, older guys that either signed with Jeremy Pruitt or transferred into this program that are starting on the offensive line. Can they sign guys out of high school and develop them? David Sanders is going to be the good test case for that.
I think that's a great question. And another question that I have is, when you have offenses that go fast and they say up-tempo, you usually don't see a dominant defense. When we think about dominant defenses, we think about teams that even when Alabama spreads you out, they still pound the ball. They play complementary football. Do you think Tennessee right now is well-equipped enough to be able to play complementary football when you go against the Alabamas and the Georgias and when it comes to the tough times in the SEC?
I do. And it's a cultural thing. It's the way you practice. It's not really like anything other than how you decide you want to run your program. This is the thing I've been screaming about with Lincoln Riley for about 2 years, and I think maybe they've got it sort of fixed at USC. Maybe we'll see. But clear, like the way USC played over the last 2 years, you could tell they don't hit at practice. Like they do not do things at practice that help their defense become a physical defense, become a good tackling defense. Now you watch them play, and you're like, oh, I bet they're hitting more at practice now because you see them making open field tackles. Tennessee's going to hit you at practice. They're going to be physical. Like they want to be physical on the offensive line too. And you're seeing like that offense, the veer and shoot, which, originated with Art Briles at Baylor. You've never seen that run with SEC level offensive linemen, really good but you are now, because you're seeing that at Ole Miss and you're seeing that at Tennessee. And it is a very exciting offense when you put some giant athletic offensive linemen in it, because you can do some more things in the run game. And I think what Tennessee's done is they've created a culture where they are still going to be very physical on the line of scrimmage, and they practice that way. And I think that's going to help them when they play Alabama and when they play Georgia, because it'll make them competitive against teams like that. Whereas teams that ran that offense before, they were tagging off at practice. It's just, you were never, ever going to beat teams like that because you just weren't equipped.
Andy, I think one of the parts of your repertoire as talent is your knowledge of X's and O's. All right, so imagine I'm a 5-star wide receiver and I'm thinking about going to Tennessee. Help me understand what's good about Tennessee's offense for me as a wide receiver.
So Dukes, I'll play Josh Heupel here.
Okay.
And you're the 5-star receiver.
Yep. Phillip Dukes, 5-star.
All right, Dukes, I have watched you beat up on all these high school corners. I'm going to break this to you. You're going to get in the SEC. There are going to be some corners that can cover you one-on-one. They're going to be first-round draft picks too. But here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to get you matched up on a safety. Like, you want to see some tape? Let's show you some tape of poor DeMarco Helms. DeMarco Helms, very good safety. He's not a lockdown corner.
Right.
So if you give Jalen Hyatt a 15-yard head start to run it right at DeMarco Helms, what do you think's going to happen? Touchdown.
Baghdad.
I am going to get you mismatched. I am going to get you covered by somebody who does not have any business covering you. And you're going to catch that ball and run for a long way. That's what I'm going to do for you. Now, look, we're still going to need you to do some things on the outside. Like when we're playing against a good corner, there are going to be some times we need you to go win that ball. So go look at Brew McCoy. See what we're doing with Brew McCoy. Big physical dude. He's going to win that ball at the point of attack. 50-50s aren't a 50 ball. A 50-50 ball for Brew McCoy. They're an 80-20 ball for Brew McCoy. Like, that's what we're going to do for you. And that's what that's how I sell it is. I sell it as we're going to take the things you do well and use those, but we're also going to get you into mismatches that allow you to be better.
Now, I love that pitch. And when I talk to SEC defensive coordinators, when they were talking about this offense, they said it's something they call mobster or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, where they're saying these guys get to make their own reads on the perimeter and they know what they're going to run. But to your point, they can see where their opposition is, and they say, you know what, this is my time to run this fly. Jalen Hyatt's licking his chops. And I think
the problem for the DCs is like the receivers are so wide. They're outside the numbers. And this is, this is actually one of the reasons why a lot of other places were sort of slow to adopt some of these offensive principles. Like there's no out route. In Tennessee, it's not in the route tree because those guys on the outside are too far outside. They can't run an out. They don't have room. So it limits in some cases what you can do. But the trade-off is you force the defense to declare what it's going to do, because unless you have just some unbelievably quick safeties or nickel folks that can cover a lot of ground, where you can disguise a little bit what you're going to do with where you line them up, you kind of have to tell the offense, we're going to put some more guys near the box because we're afraid you're going to run the ball, or we're afraid you're going to throw over the top, so we're going to abandon the box, and you can just take those 5 yards.
Yeah, even as I help as a father coach with my son now, I'm just thinking about using that. I'm like, hey, you know what? If we can make them declare what the safety is going by using the entire field, then now that gives me a mismatch. I'm thinking about like, oh man, so if I know if they drop that safety in the box, then of course I'm going over the top. And
every time.
I mean, it makes sense.
Well, and that's why I feel like if you watch the old Baylor games, like there were plays where when the box was light, the receivers didn't even run because they knew they were going to have to run more than extra. So they were conserving their energy because the box was light. You're handing off. You're going to get your 4 or 5 yards that they're just giving you. And you don't, why waste your time running? And it was crazy. Now, the history of that offense is interesting because it actually started in the high school level in Texas when So Art Briles was coaching out in West Texas. He coached a game I think it was either a playoff game. I believe it was a regular season game. No, it was a playoff game. But at the time, Texas didn't have overtime in high school football. They decided tied games based on what are called penetrations, which would be times that you got inside the 20-yard line. And so I guess the two teams had the same number of penetrations and they were tied. And so this other team just ran the ball like 19 times in a row.
Oh, wow.
And Briles is like, I'm never going to let myself get in that situation again. So he creates this offense. Now, the receivers being so far on the outside, it stems from getting basketball players to want to come out for football because the best athletes in the school were on the basketball team.
Right.
They didn't want to come block in a wing tee. They wanted to be on the outside and catch the ball. So he created an offense that made it attractive for these tall, long guys to come out and catch the ball.
Oh, wow. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, too, when you think about having athletes, and I'm looking at Tennessee's receivers, they're so athletic. Like, there's a guy from Atlanta, Mike Matthews, 5-star. He hasn't really gotten his full opportunity, but I'm on the VolQuest message boards, and there's a guy like, hey, we got to figure out how to get Mike Matthews in a slot or something because of his athletic ability, and he's a basketball player. He was averaging 22 a game last year, and that athleticism in that type of space, it's a nightmare for defenses to cover. I wanted to ask you this. When you rank tiers in the SEC when it comes to offense, the first tier, everybody's going to automatically say Ole Miss. You're probably going to say Bama. You're probably say Tennessee. If you were to rank those three, how would you rank those as of now?
That's really interesting. I think Ole Miss and Tennessee would probably be tied at the top.
Okay.
Because they are just so, like, both of them can run the ball down your throat if you aren't good up front.
Right.
And that's the thing about it. People assume this offense is a throw it all over the field offense. It is not. Ideally, you run for 300 yards and you throw for 300 yards. Like that is the situation you want ideally in this offense. And I think both those teams are actually equipped to do that against overmatched opponents. Now, the question is, can you do that against Alabama or Georgia? And I don't know if that's the case. We'll find out because their offensive lines are going to have to be able to create holes because where an Alabama or a Georgia can beat you when you play that offense is sometimes your 5 can't block their 4, and they can have a lighter box. They can get away with having a lighter box and have that DB just roaming around dealing with whatever you're going to do in the throw game. So that's the issue there. And the question is Tennessee's offensive line good enough this year? Is Ole Miss's offensive line good enough this year? Both of them have upgraded through the transfer portal for this season. Are they good enough so that when they play those teams, they can get movement and get those yards when the box is light?
When we talk about having a light, let's just say the word light, when I think about Josh Heupel and his personality, he seems to be kind of cool, like a lighter guy, just like, it's not so the world isn't all bad. He shoots basketball with the with recruits when they come up. If you could kind of describe Josh Heupel's recruiting philosophy when it comes to talking to recruits and how you see him using his personality to kind of gain those commitments.
Well, it's interesting because Josh Heupel doesn't show a lot of personality in his media stuff. He keeps it very close to the vest. He's very different around the players and the team than he is around the media. I think if you watch that video of Heupel in the locker room after the Oklahoma game, you got a very good sense of who he is as a coach and how he feels about his players. Because, he was talking about, hey, this coming back to Oklahoma wasn't about me. And then he sort of gets choked up thanking them for giving him a very special moment in his life. And, the best example I can give is from talking to people around the Tennessee program and what life was like when Jeremy Pruitt was the coach and what life is like now with Josh Heupel as the coach. When Jeremy Pruitt was the coach, the players did everything they could to get out of the complex. They wanted to go home. They did not want to be there. Now you have to make them leave. Like, guys, it's late. Go home. But they love being there. They love being around the complex. They love hanging with the coaches. And Heupel's interesting because I just remember when he got the UCF job, I was like, Josh Heupel? I didn't even know he wanted to be a head coach. and you didn't know if he'd have the right qualities. But the one quality he has that I think makes him exceptional for the Tennessee job, which I think is a very hard job, and I think you have to have the right personality for it. You have to have an inner self-confidence. And Josh Heupel has the inner self-confidence of a guy who was the starting quarterback on a national championship team. Like, us normal people cannot ever fathom what that feels like. Like, we don't have that inner glow in us. The difference is Heupel does not give a crap what you think about him.
Okay.
He knows where he's at. So unlike some of the coaches that have been of Tennessee before, who have just been sort of beaten down by the intense pressure, like the local media in Tennessee, the talk radio market is as nasty as it gets. Like, it feels like you are the coach of the Yankees if you're the head football coach at Tennessee. And so, like, you have to be able to ignore that. You have to not let that get to you. And we've seen Tennessee coaches brought down by that in the past. I don't think Heupel cares. I don't think it matters to him one bit. I think how he is around those players is all that matters to him. And he doesn't care if he makes us happy in the media or if he gives us interesting sound bites. That's not his goal here. Like, he just wants to make sure the players are having a good experience and that he does what he needs to do. And I think that is probably the right way to handle things at Tennessee. I don't know that there's another way to do it. And I look at the way he interacts with those guys, and it's good for this era of college football. Because I think one thing we don't talk about enough in recruiting is how equipped are these coaches to deal with the fact that guys are free agents every single year? How do you create an environment where people want to stay and play for you? And I know people that you get the people, well, that means you can't coach them hard. It's just more the sissification of America. That's not true.
Right.
Like, Kirby Smart and his staff coach players as hard as humanly possible. And the players keep coming back. Because as Nick Saban says, they add value for those players.
Right.
Over and over and over again, they add value. And the other part about Kirby Smart is, like, if you're a football player, you know where he's coming from. Like, he's coaching you hard because he wants you to be your best.
Right.
But you know that this dude was a dog when he played. Josh Heupel was a dog when he played. I actually think it allows, because it used to not matter as much if a guy was a good player or not. But I feel like that allows you to coach guys harder now because they don't necessarily respect somebody who didn't play or who wasn't good when they played.
Right.
But Josh Heupel was the national championship winning quarterback. Kirby Smart was an all SEC safety. So when that guy's lighting you up, you're like, all right, he's been there. I'm cool with this.
Yeah, I think the only other option is like to be like a Phil Jackson Zen type coach. If you don't have that type pedigree, you got to be somebody who can tap into mentalities but it's going to be hard for you to bark.